So welcome to another wargame review from theplayersaid.com. My name's Alexander.
And I'm Grant.
And today we're taking a look at a brand new game from PHALANX called Iron Blood, Snow and Mud. And this game, I apologize in advance, is designed by a gentleman...
We had quite the discussion about this.
...who goes by the name of...
It's not that hard.
It's a Guglielmo
I think it's perfect.
Duccioli. It's double C.
Okay, I'll give you that.
That's what we're going with.
I'll give you that.
I don't think Guglielmo is right. It might be a Guglielmo.
Yeah, maybe.
But I don't know, so I'm very sorry.
Yeah.
Please put the pronunciation
You
in
put
the
a nice
comments.
game together. That's all I gotta say.
So yeah, this is a little small format, two-player East Front World War II game.
Mm-hmm. And it's a bit abstract, only in the regard that it's a very grand strategic type.
I would go as far to say I think it's very abstract.
Yeah.
This is a very different type of game or feeling of game than most East Front games out there.
It uses counters. There are hexes there, but it's not really like a normal, typical, is a better word, hex and counter war game.
Yes, although, you know, the little units, there's armor units and leg units, there's some air assets you can commit to things.
Partisans.
The board's divided up into hexes, but really, this is a game of movement and positioning, and that represents kind of logistics. Mm-hmm. That's the real kind of gem of the game, is how you move around your units and get them into positions to do good attacks. You want to have your tanks as the spearheads, supported by as many infantry units as possible. That's going to maximize how many dice you get, and then it's a little mini bucket of dice game. You're going to roll anywhere from kind of
3 to 6 dice.
Yeah, sometimes you can roll a lot more. Sometimes you can roll 2 or 3.
I think the highest we got was 10? 10 dice one time?
Didn't you roll like a...
Maybe I rolled 11.
I think you rolled 10, but you scored
got
like a 16. And that's
yeah, I rolled really well. Several 3s and 2s on those.
And the dice are little D3s, but they're not. They've got 3 1s, and they've got 2 2s and 1 3 on them. So it's you're going to roll a lot of low numbers in this game.
Yeah. How many times did we roll 5 dice and we'd get a 5?
You roll 5, yeah.
A lot.
A lot. But that's not abnormal with the way that the dice are structured. But it's, you know, chucking dice to resolve some combat, great. There's nothing new about that, but the joy of the game, especially as the Germans, is you got this big old army kind of crushed in, and it's making that push across Germany, and then, if you need to, doing that same thing, but falling back.
You mean across Russia?
Yes, across Russia, yes.
Germany pushing across Russia.
Yes.
Yep.
But it's, all that to say, there's like 3 different types of movement in this game. You have
Which was really interesting, I thought.
Yeah.
And I thought a very well done part of the game.
Yes.
I enjoyed how the weather came into that and was fairly unique. I think the difficulty we had sometime was, okay, you can't convoy move over this kind of terrain.
Yeah, there's this singular play aid.
Which there should have been 2.
In a 2-player game.
Yeah. Not our favorite thing, especially because we're called the player's aid.
Right. And it lists all these different things which are obstacles, but then it also has the conditions for those, some of which are seasonally based, some of them are terrain based, some of them are, control based, and then their effects on supply. But the fact that there's 3 different movement types and one of everything else in the game tells you that the focus of this game is on movement and positioning.
Sure.
And I think that's where the kind of fun stuff is. So
and I think that's where its strength is.
Without doubt.
The reality of it is the combat system's fairly simple, and it works.
Yeah.
But it's about the movement, the type of movement across the terrain, taking the weather into account, and then getting into position to, like you said, maximize the number of dice you're going to roll. And that becomes, it feels like a tactical puzzle.
Yes.
How do I get this guy to convoy move through these 4 or 5 units, get up to the front to support a tank attack? It's hard to do. It's not easy, especially if the attack for the Germans doesn't go very well and there's a lot of losses. Man, it can be over pretty quick.
Well, and that's, that's the interesting part of this, is that you're doing all of these movements, and part of the reason that I say this game feels like an abstract almost is because you are kind of puzzling it out. It is very puzzly. How do I solve this? I can convoy a guy and he can move through all of my friendly units as far as he can go, without crossing a river.
Yeah.
And then he can kind of plop at the end. Or
I
you
like
can,
that word, plop.
Yeah.
That's a good word.
Or you can just do
Plop.
like a little tactical advance where you just move one space.
Yep.
Or you've got the tanks, which you can advance that one space, or you can do the convoy, and then you have the blitz. You can roll a die, and it's a 50-50 to see if you can move an additional space.
You have to roll a 2 or a 3 on that D3. It's really a D6.
Yeah.
So that's a 50-50 chance of succeeding. So I did that multiple times.
But you can keep doing that roll until you fail. So it's a
Yep.
little bit pushy luck of like, oh, I need to get this guy up. Roll, 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 roll.
Yep.
And it's 50% each time, which isn't great, but you can do those kind of funky things and have those moments as well.
And I would, while I'm thinking about it, I think early in the game, obviously this was our first play, but early in the game, my instinct was to push that. To push as far as I could. And ultimately, I did that in a few areas of the map, and I started to have the concern about being cut off for supply. Because the way initiative works, you know, at the beginning of the game, until 1940?
It's the break after end of 1942.
That initiative switches, and the Russians can go first. But because they go second in the first 2 years, they can really do some cutting of supply and really use their partisans to cut you off. So my instinct was to push it and do that as much as I could. But then I started having concern about, I don't want to lose those armies because Germans don't get reinforcements.
No.
So that is an interesting thing. That to me is one of the main central points of the game. How hard do I push?
Yes.
And where?
And it's making that happen, and the order in which you move your guys is very important in this one, because you might move a guy up to create this long line, convoy someone through that, and then you can keep following that up. Or if you move a guy too early, all of a sudden there's a break in your convoy, and you can't use the whole of your convoy of your units all lined up anymore. Like, oh no, oops.
I've kind of
walk back some of that stuff and making sure
Yeah.
you do it all in the right order to then get them in the position that you need them to be, or set them up for next time at least.
And frankly, I think when we play East Front war games, I think that's always one of my favorite parts particularly as the Germans. How far do you push? Where do you punch through? And here you had that in a simpler, more abstracted way, but you did definitely have it.
But it's that really thinky part of it. And then the other thinky part of it is then you get to resolve combats. And the initiative player decides the order in which they happen.
Very important.
And I think some kind of more traditional hex and counter war games suffer from that, where it's like it doesn't really matter.
Yeah.
Like we'll just kind of go down the line and do them all. Some it matters where you're like, we can do a breakthrough here or not, depending on the timing. But in this one, it's like, okay, if I resolve this combat here, that frees up this particular unit who can now support this other attack. Or if I win here, I'm going to kill your leg unit or retreat him so that he can't support this adjacent combat anymore.
Yeah.
And so picking those
is very important.
It can be very, very, very key. And I like that. I like that choice.
The reality of a difference of just one die from having a leg unit in position to support is the difference between... can be the difference between winning and losing. Particularly when your die results only go up to 3, and more often than not, you're rolling majority ones.
Yes.
Our rolls were typically anywhere from 3 to 8, depending on the number of dice. So as we continued to go through that, I started thinking, okay, I need at least 6 dice to guarantee I at least get like a 7 or an 8. And that was important, keeping those leg units in contact and out of dangers, but allowing them to support.
Yes. What I'll do is I'll show you how it functions so you get a bit of better idea of what it is we're talking about, because you kind of have to see it.
Yeah.
And then we'll wrap up with some final thoughts. So here's a look at the map. Very small map, as you can see. Not a whole lot of spaces on it, but basically you got this little turn track up here, and you're going to play, generally speaking, 3 turns per year, only 2 in 1941 because we start so late. And you'll have a muddy season, a clear season, and a snowy season, and mostly those dictate, like the snow dictates whether you do or don't get air units, and the mud dictates whether you do or don't get things like convoy movement or strategic movement, things like that. But the game is played in a sense that for the first half of the game, it's Germans do their stuff first, and then Soviets will do their stuff. But then that flips, the initiative flips in 1943, where it's Russians going first. And what you're going to do is you're just going to go through a little sequence of play, and the sequence of play is listed down here at this little track. And it's, again, we talk about symbology, because this is a Polish-English company, PHALANX, and it helps to make the game more multilingual if there's not a ton of text. Is at least part of the thinking, I believe. So first off, we're going to have this little kind of a placement of assets. And this is where if you have, so let's say we've got, it's clear, say here we'll do clear. If you have assets available, these little air units, or you might have a naval unit up here for the Germans, and there's a one down here for the Soviets down in the Black Sea. What you're going to do is you're going to assign those. And I really, part of that really like, you have to assign your assets and commit those before you do any moves and attacks. So you say, I'm going to throw these into Moscow, I'm going to do an attack there. I do not want to get counterattacked here and lose this, or over here, so I might put one defensively, or I might put one into a space where I'm not at yet, but I think you might move, and it's a way to kind of dissuade you from moving there, kind of a thing. Then I'm going to, defensively as the Soviets, I'm going to put mine out. I might put these in to counter these, to give myself an equal amount of dice, or I might put them elsewhere to support other attacks I might be launching. And then you're going to do your moves. You're going to do your moves. And this is where the real heart of the game is in the movement. You can always do a little tactical move, where you basically just move space. Real boring. Nothing interesting there. Or you can start getting into things like convoy movement. Convoy movement is where it is something that I really, really like about this game. And we'll just kind of set up some pieces. We had a lot of deaths here. What convoy movement allows you to do is to move through any amount of your own units without passing through obstacles. So these little guys, normally with attack move, you can move one space. Great. With a convoy move, you could move 1, 2, 3, and then when you get to the end of the convoy, because it's the last unit you want to move through, you can then do attack move. So you could move here if you wanted to. Or you could go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Now we're going to do attack move. And so you could get all the way around here through your convoy. Why is that important? That's important because your order of operations is key. Because if you move this guy, let's say, oh, we're going to attack move into here to initiate a combat, which we committed a bunch of troops to. Well, now all of a sudden this idiot can't get all the way around here, and he has to stop here. That's fine if we do that, because now we can taxi through that. But you have to be very careful, especially early on, that if you break your lines and your rhythm, so to speak, of the game, your charge forward will stall very quickly. And you can't, when you're doing convoy moves, you cannot cross rivers, you cannot cross enemy units, you can start in like a woods, but you can't go through a woods. So there's some limitations to that, so be very careful about where you place your units. And it's a really neat part of the game, and it's very puzzly in that sense of trying to make it happen, and how you do them all, because then you move all your guys, and then the enemy is then going to move all of their guys. So they're going to do their kind of reaction moves where they're going to swing around. They might fill in some gaps that you left, or they might try to outmaneuver you, things like that. In this instance, we have a lot of Russian units, so it's not going to happen. And then we move on to some combat, and combat is simply a little mini bucket of dice, and whoever gets the highest score wins. So in this instance, we've got 2 Soviet planes and 2 German ones. So what we'll do is we've got a tank unit gets 3, and they get 1 for each supporting infantry unit that's nearby or adjacent. So they get 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 dice. So they're going to take 7 of their pool of dice. That's what they're going to roll. And we talked about the dice, but it's a little d6, but there's 3 1s, 2 2s, and a 3. It's a little dice like that. So Germans are going to have 7 dice. The Soviets have 1 2 because a leg units or an infantry unit is only 2. 3 4 for supporting units. 5 because they're in a friendly city. 6, 7, because they've got 2 air support as well. 2, 4, 6, 7. So this is a big combat where we're going to roll a lot of dice each. So let's just chuck those and we'll kind of see what happens. Here we'll use the spoopy one. The cursed one. Great. So we rolled 3, 6, 10, 14, 15. Wow. Big roll for the Germans. Germans got 15. Hopefully I can remember that here. And we're just looking at the number. That's all we're doing. Now the Russians are going to roll. And they rolled pretty pitifully. 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So 15 to 10. The 15 is going to win. So the Germans are going to win that combat. What that means is that the Russians have to retreat. So they're going to retreat, and you have to retreat towards your map edge. So they're going to back out of this space. Now, if we had been able to swing this guy all the way down here, there's no legal retreat path because they're stacking. And so the unit's going to be dead. Not great. So again, moving and positioning, very important. He's going to retreat one space. All these guys kind of go back to their little homes. And he moves in. He was in that space. And that's the end of that combat. If you roll double their score, you just eliminate the unit outright. With this many dice, that's difficult to do just because you know the defender's going to get some numbers. With lower dice, if I roll 4 or 5 dice and I roll well, and you roll 2 or 3 dice and you roll those pitiful ones, it can happen. I've played a game of this where I just got all my guys killed. It was pretty interesting. Once we're done with all the combats, we're going to remove any partisans, which we may have been occupying the same space as. Anti-partisan activities, great, he's gone. And then we're going to change control of areas. So if we control all 3 of these spaces, the Germans, Moscow becomes German controlled. That's very bad for the Russians. It's probably going to be the end of the game. But if we control both sides of any of these other cities or industrial centers, we're going to place our little marker on there to say that we control that. You have to control both at the same time. It is not enough for you to go like this, because you lose control of this. If you occupy both during this phase, then you get to place a control marker on it, which are too far away for me to get one, so we'll just put this one here, great. So you have to commit assets to taking these cities, and that is a very large investment for the Germans. You need to be very careful about how and when you do that. Then we're going to check supply, and basically you need to be able to trace supply back to your home areas, or to any cities if you're the Russians, or any controlled cities if you're the Germans. But that stuff can be blocked pretty easily. So you can block things here and there, and then all of a sudden, our supply lines have to go, these guys have to trace all the way through this way, which is fine. But we're a couple partisans away, because you can't trace across rivers. We're one part, like if we hadn't killed that guy, if we got a partisan out, all of a sudden this becomes very tenuous. And when you lose supply, everyone dies. It's not good. Get your air assets back. We get some reinforcements out from the turn schedule. And then we move on to turn track. But that's really what this is. It's not a complex game, but it is a puzzly and thinky game about how to move your units, when to move your units, the order in which you do your combats. That's important because if I now go to attack this, I've got a unit to attack with if he had moved in there, and a supporting unit. But if I was back here, well, all of a sudden, this guy is attacking kind of on his own, doesn't have any support in this combat. So chaining your combat so you can get support for future combats, really, really important. But that's a look at how the game works. What we'll do is we'll wrap up here with a few final thoughts. So that was a look at the game. Not a huge game, right?
No.
Small little package.
Well, when you look at it, from Leningrad to, Rostov down here, the Sea of Azov and the Black Sea, it's like 5 hexes, right? Yeah. 6 hexes, 3, 7. So it's a big game. Or it's a small game, but it's a really big scale.
Area. You can take this, anywhere with you if this is something that you're interested in.
Yep.
If people like it, it's something where I could see people like doing a little tournament of it, right?
Sure.
With low time investment in it. So that means you could play a bunch of it and have a good time if that's what you like.
I think the game, once you know the rules, 75 to 90 minutes, I think is what it's going to take you.
If it goes the whole way. There are auto victory conditions. If the Germans capture Stalin, it's done. And if
It's doable.
if the Russians counterattack, they're going to win as well.
And capture a home area,
Yes.
right?
But that's more difficult.
Yes.
This is, yeah. I played this twice. I played it once with James Buckley, who works with Phalanx, and he played as the Russians and taught me how to do it. I rolled really poorly, and all my tanks died, which was not good. Don't do that. And so I'm like, oh, I could see with that kind of thing where the Russians could have significant, real threat into Germany.
Yeah.
But I think as long as you don't totally goof with the Germans, it will be very late in the game before the Russians really make that push into Germany.
Yeah.
So it's that kind of late threat of like, you're going to lose. But I think a lot of the games are going to end up probably closer to a draw or something like that.
Well, and the victory conditions, we had a long discussion about that. The victory conditions are twofold. One, to win, the Germans just have to capture Stalin, which means taking all 3 hexes of Moscow, which is where he's located, before he successfully makes the escape roll. What do they call that?
It doesn't have a name.
Okay.
It's just like the
escape
Stalin roll.
Yeah, the Stalin roll. So you're going to get an opportunity at that, but that's not going to come until turn 7, turn 8, maybe turn 9.
Yeah.
And in our experience, right, just with this game, it boiled down to you rolling a die, needing a 2 or a 3, which is a 50-50 shot on a 6-sider, right? There are 2 2-sided and then 1 3. So it's a 50-50 roll. You made it. You then moved him down to the Caucasus, right?
Yeah, well, we moved him down here.
Yeah. And at that point, I had a turn, or was it 2 turns?
I think you had the 1. Yeah, so you either...
To move down and capture him, but that was going to be real hard.
Yeah, and then at the end of the game, if you haven't done either of those, you have to control the entirety of Moscow and have destroyed either Leningrad or Sevastopol, or control 3 of the industrial centers.
As the Soviets?
Yeah, Moscow is one of them. So, like, you have to have taken a significant amount of territory.
Boy, I just don't see that.
And to have that at the end of the game, which is...
Yeah.
That's very difficult. So, it's...
Well, the reality of the way the game works in the combat system, in order to lose your guy, you have to be doubled.
Yes.
Right.
So forced to retreat where you cannot.
Right. Retreat into an area where you can't because of enemy units.
Yeah, stacking.
Or retreat
rivers.
across a river or into a river. And that actually happened a little more than I expected it to happen. It just depends. You got to take advantage of that when that happens.
Yeah.
I remember seeing that here near
we have
Kharkov.
One guy tank up here, and then early on it happened as well,
Down
somewhere
there.
down here as well.
But that's important to understand. So losing a guy is not that easy. I think I lost 3 guys the entire time. I bet you lost
I probably lost
5,
more like 5 or 6.
5 or 6. So you need to understand that. You're not going to lose a lot of guys. You're going to have to do a lot of retreating. And you always should be open and allow yourself an opening to retreat. I think that's something I would have done a better job of trying to prevent you from being able to retreat a few times.
Yeah.
Which is a hallmark of these front games. But it's not that easy to eliminate units.
And controlling the urban centers and the cities
Is very important very quickly as soon as possible.
You want to try and do it as quick as possible, which means you basically are trying to take both hexes in one turn,
Yep.
which you have to really plan for and stage, and that
Yep.
can be very challenging.
But that is a very key. You have to plan to take those hexes on the same attack with 2 different units. It's vital.
Yeah.
And I think that's something I didn't do as well. I think had I done a better job on that in Kharkov and Lvov or Kiev, I would have been able to go towards Rostov and maybe kept your options a little limited to escape. But you also don't have a ton of units, so you can't.
Yeah, you don't have
can't
a
do
ton of
everything.
units and you don't have a ton of time. And this
Yeah.
is a game of efficiencies.
It is.
Is the way I see it.
So
Yeah,
it's-
you got some dice rolling, but
Yeah.
a lot of it can be under your control movement-wise. And again, we'll come back to that's really where this game shines.
Yeah.
Is that figuring out those puzzles, making
Yep.
it work as best you can.
And then I thought the partisan concept was really cool. I mean, you were able to place those. You rolled a die.
Yeah.
So you're going to get 1 to 3 of those every turn. I think luckily early on you only rolled 1s and 2s more often than not. But those became a real pain in the neck.
Yeah, those are going to block supply back to
Yep.
Germany, and you have to unplug those basically. Otherwise, you're going to be in some real trouble with
So that's
supply.
something I think maybe I would have done a better job of next time, or tried to, but that I think is a really neat part of the game. What I would say about this game, I feel like the Soviets didn't have as much to do.
No, but maybe if I was a better Soviet player, I wouldn't have
Sure.
lost quite so many guys.
Sure.
But there a lot of the time it feels like, oh, I'm just going to sit and defend in my city.
Right. And then I think the other thing that we discussed that I had a little bit of an issue with, we played the entire game for it to come down to a roll. When I had Stalin all surrounded, you had to roll a d6 and get a 2 or a 3, which is a 50-50.
Yeah, 50-50, Stalin's going to like hop, skip, and a jump somewhere else.
And had you failed that, I believe the next turn, I would have taken the final third hex.
Yes.
And the game would have been over. So I was very close to winning. You were very close to losing. Ultimately, because you rolled, we had a draw.
Yeah.
So I think this is a game that lends itself very well to you play one side,
And then flip it.
you
Yeah.
flip it, and you play the other side and just kind of see who did
Without a
better.
doubt, that's how I would play it.
Yeah.
Yes, that's how I would play this game.
But I thought it was pretty unique and interesting. Graphically, I think this is a beautiful little game. I thought everything on the board is very well done. The board is very pretty. I thought the iconography was very good.
And it being, it's Phalanx is a Polish-English company. They do a lot of iconography in their games
Got it.
to avoid having to make significant
Translational.
translations and stuff. Like this is the same board they'll use for every
Got it.
language, right? So you get that. That's a little Phalanx idiosyncrasy, I believe. That they always try to lead into that in their games. So you have all that here. The rules were very easy to
Pretty
pass.
straightforward for the most part.
And there's a lot of examples
Yeah.
as well. And it's not a particularly complex
I thought
game.
the player aid was really good. It just, we needed 2 of them.
Yeah.
So the other thing we didn't necessarily talk about that makes the game a little bit more of a game were the generals, right? So as we go along, we each got, I think, 3 general tokens, and they just give you extra things. An extra dice in combat, or a reroll of a die.
I can reroll, extra die.
Yeah. What was the one that I got a removed or eliminated infantry unit to come
Which
kind
is
of in
your
the back?
only reinforcement in the whole game.
And that was actually very valuable because I used him to kind of clean up and keep the supply lines open. But I thought that was kind of cool. Love the use of the aircraft. I'm not so sure why they didn't include like a degradation of the German aircraft over time.
Yeah.
I started with 4 Stukas and had 4 Stukas at the end. Now the Russian Sturmovix, right?
Yeah, started with 1 and then
built
ended
up
the
to
game
3.
with 4.
4.
By
And
the very end.
I don't know. Maybe the Germans should have lost one, like say in 1943, and maybe even one, but then it would make it even more of a draw. It's going to be even that much harder.
But it's it's also a short game at this scale.
Yep.
Is it that big a deal?
Nah.
Probably not.
But it was fun. I would play it again. I would recommend this game. It's definitely an introductory war game.
Yes.
We'll get people interested in the genre, and then if you want to go further,
Whilst this could be your very first war game, we're very experienced war gamers within what we do.
and we knew what we were doing.
And this was still fascinating to
Oh,
play.
yeah.
The things that you're thinking about and doing, the way you play is very different from other games.
And very interesting.
Ever since I was first shown this, where it was like, oh, this is so cool of like how you do this.
Yeah.
The playing of the game is very fun and very interesting.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I enjoyed it, had a good time, would play it again, and would recommend it.
Yes.
So
And it's a nice wintry title and a nice Christmas theme.
sure, Iron Blood, Snow and Mud. Doesn't that sound Christmassy?
Something like that. So Iron Blood, Snow and Mud from Phalanx. Check it out if this is something you're interested in, but appreciate you very much for tuning in. I've been Alexander for theplayersaid.com.
And I'm Grant.